What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Saturday, so time to go over the biggest ADP changes over the last week. I'm actually going to do things a little bit different for these Saturday videos from now on. I'm going to limit the ADP portion of the video to only like the biggest and really the most important movers. And then we're going to spend the rest of our time going over the news from the last week that I think is the most important. I think that'll be the most valuable for you guys, but if you want me to go back to the old format, just let me know. So I record these, remember, 2 days before uploads. We're talking about ADP changes from last Thursday to this Thursday and the biggest news through noon on Thursday. So with that being said, let's hop into things. So number one riser is unsurprisingly Julio Jones. We talked about last week how he was the number one riser last week, but like obviously he was going to keep going up. He's up 3 more rounds to pick 127, which in a 12-team league, that is the middle of the 11th round. I have him 7 wide receiver spots above ADP right now as a late 9th round pick. So he's still got a little bit more rising to do, and I do think he's going to make it to that point. I think he's going to kind of stabilize around that 9th, 10th round range. And I have no idea if he's going to skyrocket more. It really just depends what happens in camp. He has not been part of like, a video where he's mossing someone yet. He hasn't had like a super positive story come out. And yet his ADP is still kind of trending towards around that 10th round range. And so if that ends up happening, I don't know. Could he end up in the 7th or 8th round? Maybe. I think that's a little bit aggressive, but we're just going to have to watch this one. Again, I think he should be valued around like the late 9th round, and I think that's kind of where he's trending by ADP. But if he mosses someone, he's going up around that night. Romeo Doubs and Isaiah McKenzie are also both skyrocketing. They're each up 2.5 rounds. Doubs now going in the late 15th, McKenzie going in the middle of the 14th round. Both of them are seeing this rise because they're having very, very, very positive reports in camp. And honestly, both of the rises are expected and they make sense. Both are not only having great camps, but they're on elite offenses and offenses that need roles filled. McKenzie, of course, can win the slot role for the Bills. For the Packers, Romeo Doubs and the Packers, if you guys don't know, he's the rookie there. They just need help at wide receiver. And so if there's a late wide receiver in drafts that's performing well in camp on a team that needs help at receiver, it just makes all the sense in the world. They're going to go up, especially with Christian Watson still on the sidelines and no one liking Sammy Watkins. It's just so easy for Romeo Doubs to see this rise. I think I mentioned last week that Isaiah McKenzie, I did not think would make it into the 13th round. I thought the 14th round was kind of his ceiling, but every single report right now has been so positive that his ADP is trending into like the 11th or 12th round. That's where I'm seeing it end up right now. So I'm definitely going to end up being wrong on that prediction. As of recording this, I have McKenzie as a late 13th round pick and Doubs as a mid 14th round pick. So both of them are still like a half a round to a round of value right now. You can absolutely still draft them at their current ADPs, but that might only be true for like 2 or 3 days. If every single day there's really good reports from these guys, they're going to keep moving up. And so we'll keep reevaluating on the Tuesday live streams that we do. I'll look at their ADPs again. You guys can ask about that, but like I'm going to give more reports on kind of how things are looking. It might be the case where by that point they're like not even values in the ranking. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But preseason is definitely going to help us sort out this one. If we do get like final confirmation, it is absolutely Isaiah McKenzie always on the field in the slot. He's going to go up, but he should go up a lot in the rankings. And then Doubs, if like Doubs wins a starting wide receiver spot, he's going to go up as well. But that's something we can't really know yet. And so we'll find that out more in the preseason. Every Giants wide receiver is up. I'm not even going to talk about this one anymore. I feel like I talk about them twice a week. We have been drafting this trio well above their ADP. We've been drafting them when they were going 3 to 4 rounds later in drafts. Just keep drafting Giants wide receivers. If you have like a billion shares of them, like I have Wan'Dale Robinson on like pretty much every best ball team, he's my highest owned player by a mile. If that's the case for you on Underdog and you want to pump the brakes as their ADPs trend up because you already have so much, and if they end up being phenomenal picks, you have them in a better ADP than everyone else, so there's no need to go overboard. I think that's totally fine. But for the rest of you who are in redraft leagues, continue drafting them. I still think they're all really good picks. We mentioned last week that Wan'Dale, Devonta Parker, and Allen Robinson were the three names that I thought were having really, really good camps, but for some reason we're not seeing their ADPs really change. Wan'Dale is now up 18 spots. Parker's up 11 spots, and then Allen Robinson is the second biggest riser of any player in the top 50, going up half round, which is a lot for a player in the top 50. So maybe the market's just a little bit slow to react sometimes to news. Wan'Dale, we already went over, but just to reiterate on the other ones, Parker is a phenomenal pick, and even with the rise in ADP, 11 spots this last week, is still being undervalued. And then Allen Robinson is an absolute stud, and I think he is still valued in the rankings, though as he continues to rise, like I said, rises in the top 50 are a lot. When you go up half a round in the top 50, that's a lot. If he goes up another half round next week, he's going to very quickly not become a value. So we need to keep an eye on that one a lot. I said second biggest riser, though, for Allen Robinson. The biggest riser is Alvin Kamara. He is up about a half a round or so. He's now going right at the turn. His new ADP is 26. And so teams are able to get, and this is what I've been able to do sometimes, and I highly recommend while it still lasts trying to get this combination. But I've been able to have some underdog drafts where it's like either Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey with Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara. You're not going to be able to get that for very long. I do think that Kamara is going to start going around pick like 19, 20. I think by this time next week, he'll go up another half round and be around that pick 19, 20 range. Late second round, I think, is where he should be, given that, again, his court date was pushed back into, I believe, late September, but it's becoming more likely that he does not get suspended this season, that the court process plays out during the season, and that maybe the suspension comes down next year. There is a chance, though, that if all the court proceedings happen and the league decides to suspend him, that it happens to close this year, which would obviously be bad, right? Because if you're drafting him on Underdog, you're not getting him in the playoffs. If you're drafting him in redraft leagues, well, he can get you to the playoffs, but if he's not playing championship weekend, that's going to stink. So still some risk here, but late second round, I mean, if he ends up not being suspended this season and you get to pair him with either a top 3 wide receiver or McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor, that's like an unfair start. So I think he's definitely worth taking if he's still there in the late second round right now. Biggest fallers are mostly all injury related. Obviously, Tim Patrick is down, but Van Jefferson, Gus Edwards, Jameson Williams, Pat Freiermuth, Christian Watson, all of them are down a good amount. But again, when people are hurt this late or just not practicing yet, that's going to happen. The only other names that really matter as far as riser is concerned is Russell Gage, Ronald Jones, and Tyrion Davis-Price. Gage is down to the wide receiver 46 right now, which I do think is roughly where he's going to stabilize. If he falls any further than this, I do think he's going to become a really nice value. This is still a super pass-heavy offense, so even adding Julio Jones, there are still plenty of targets to go around. The rest of the fallers, I do agree with. I have talked about how Ronald Jones might not even be the backup right now. McKinnon is getting work as the backup. They have Pacheco, or however you say his name, is looking good in camp. He could get some snaps. And so it's just a big rotation behind Clyde and honestly behind McKinnon after that. And so when you also know he's not going to catch passes, it's like his path to a ceiling is getting very, very thin. He was going way too early. So we already had him tanked in the rankings. Even with the new ADP, we're not drafting Ronald Jones. And then Davis-Price, he's being outplayed by not only Trey Sermon, but also Jordan Mason as well. Now, I don't even know if Mason's going to make the team, but if Mason's making the team as like a pass catching specialist, if Sermon's mixing in, if they already have Elijah Mitchell, if Deebo Samuel's going to get carries, like where is the upside for Davis-Price? So his fall makes sense. Still definitely not drafting him, even at the new ADP. All right, let's get to the fun part. Let's talk about some news at a camp that I think is worth knowing for sure. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen a lot of this news, but you can get my take on it as well. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, but you're in the Discord, then which you have access to if you get all in, then you can go to the Twitter updates tab, and all of that's going to populate on there. So Brandon Aiyuk has apparently been dominating in camp. Every single day there's a new clip of him mossing someone. He has just been really, really good. And it's worth noting that Jauan Jennings has not had a good camp, and that Danny Gray has had a good camp. So we'll see how that 3 situation kind of works out. Definitely possible Danny Gray jumps over Jauan Jennings for the number 3 spot, but it's pretty locked in that it's Deebo at the top and Aiyuk second. Now, we had positive reports last year from camp, and look how that turned out, right? He went in the doghouse for most of the beginning part of the season, but Shanahan has talked about how he is definitely out of the doghouse. He has been practicing really well. He has taken a step forward, so we can feel pretty confident knowing that this season he is going to have that role. I'm still a tad hesitant to really project him well, because it is such a run-heavy offense. I believe Deebo is obviously still the number 1. Kittle is still there, and so it's difficult to give Aiyuk a 23% target share when you've got really good players around him, and he almost needs that to be really ahead of ADP. So I have moved him up to match his current ADP as wide receiver 42. He's just someone that I don't want to reach for. If you end up getting him as wide receiver 45, 46, bravo. I think that's a really good value for him. If he falls in your draft, becomes a top wide receiver, take him. I don't really want to take him at ADP. I don't really want to be reaching ahead of ADP. And if someone else reaches for him, don't feel too bad. I still think this is a very run-heavy offense, that he's still the number 2, that Kittle's still going to be involved. And so the ceiling might not be as high as people think. Davis Mills and Brandon Cooks have apparently been tearing up camp. Now, to be fair, they're facing the Texans defense, and so, how good are they really doing if they're tearing up the Texans defense? But we're going to know very soon, once joint practices start, once they get out there in the preseason, which I would expect, some quarterbacks don't play in the preseason, some vets don't play, so maybe Brandon Cooks won't play in the preseason, but I would imagine, Davis Mills still didn't even start all of last season. He's a year 2 player. They're going to probably want him out there for a little bit in the preseason. So we'll kind of see how they're looking then. But we're going to get a good indication soon of them not just playing the Texans defense. I'm very high on Brandon Cooks, very high on Nico Collins right now, and that's projecting Houston as a bottom 5 offense. If it looks like, as we work our way through this next month, that they won't be bottom 5, they may be bottom 10 or 12, they might get scary high in my projections. Again, right now I don't project Houston very well, and these two are still smashing ADP. Alie-Cox seems to be the clear tight end 1 for the Colts. Apparently, Granson and Jelani Woods have not looked so great so far, and Woods in particular apparently has looked lost on offense. We have wanted Moali to really assume a number 1 role, because he's been good whenever they give him targets. He's just never had a consistent good target share, but he's got the frame. The kid's 6'5". I think he's almost 270 pounds. He is an absolute unit. Can be featured heavily in the red zone, can be a mismatch between the 20s. He's a good player with a lot of upside. So I only have him projected as a tight end 24 right now. Don't get too excited and start taking him as a tight end 1, but a really good guy, an underdog to take as your second or third tight end, especially a second tight end, maybe if you went with tight end early. And even in redraft leagues, if you want to double dip late, you want to take, 2 kind of sleepers that you like and try and hit on one of them, I think he's a really good tight end too, and nobody is talking about him. You can get him in the last round for sure. Elijah Moore has apparently been a god in practice, which makes sense because he is one. If you've watched this channel over the last 2 years, you know my love for Elijah Moore. He is a phenomenal wide receiver. He is clearly the best wide receiver on the Jets. That will be evident this season. And if he is someone that is at the top of the rankings when you're on the board, do not hesitate. Please, please, please draft him as much as you can this season. Deebo Samuel said the reports about him not wanting to play running back were false, and that, quote, at this point, they're just making stuff up. Now, I don't know where the original report came from, but Deebo is saying that he's good to play running back snaps this season, and his contract has running back incentives in it, so we can pretty safely assume that he is going to be in a pretty similar role this year. And of course, he was the wide receiver 2 last season. He was phenomenal. I cannot project him for 8 touchdowns on 59 carries like he had last year. He's going to be less efficient than that. But I have him for 55 carries. I have him for 3.5 rushing touchdowns. And when you have someone who's the number 1 wide receiver on the team as well, projecting for, again, 55 carries and 3.5 touchdowns on the ground, that's going to secure them as a very easy top 10 wide receiver. He is my wide receiver 7, right behind CeeDee Lamb, as a very quality pick in round 2, the end of round 2, of course. And so, yeah, don't hesitate to draft him. He's going to be really good again this season, even with Trey Lance at quarterback. Treylon Burks is having a phenomenal camp. He was clocked at 21 miles per hour, which is the fastest time for a 220-pound rookie wide receiver since Julio Jones 11 years ago. As we expected, his ADP bottomed out at like 96, 97, then camp opened back up, and it's already shot back up to around 88. I think it's going to work its way back into the 70s. You should have been drafting him when he was in the 90s. I think you can still be drafting him right now. He's going to have a really good year, and it just makes sense that there was like one negative report, but then a lot of time went by. His ADP had time to drop, but he's a great prospect in a great situation. You probably want to be drafting him right now. Another rookie having a great camp is George Pickens. He's been looking really good, and he has not been involved in special teams drills. It is pretty clear that he's going to have a really large role in the offense this season, though he's still behind Deontay Johnson. He's still behind Najee Harris, who's going to get a billion touches. Like, obviously, Najee's a running back, but like in terms of touches, targets, all that stuff, Najee and Deontay are at the top. Then it's Pickens after that. And honestly, you could say that Claypool might still be ahead of him, though Claypool a little bit banged up right now. But I think he's worth a dart throw. He was a player that I was really high on as a prospect overall, really talented wide receiver. There are some scouts out there that thought like he was one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the draft class. There were just other reasons that kind of pushed him down the draft, but he's a really good player, a lot of upside, a lot of talent. So again, worth a dart throw late because he's not going very early in drafts. We finally have some Will Fuller news. It seems like he is going to join a team later in camp and is probably just waiting to see how many injuries happen, which team becomes the most desperate for a wide receiver, and then that'll be the team that pays him the most, and that's the team he'll want to join. We have not seen him play in a while, but we know the talent is there, and if he signs with a team like the Broncos, like the Cowboys, his ADP is going to skyrocket, so you probably want to still be drafting him. So that's the latest news and ADP changes over the last week. You can see ADPs around the industry by looking at the free ADP page on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And if you want to see my rankings, projections, player notes, risk grades, strategy articles, team grade tool, and a whole lot more, you can see all of that on the website as well. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about running backs. I would avoid drafting on Underdog. Monday with another episode of Mock Draft Monday, and then Tuesday live 8 p.m. Eastern to go over more news from camps and to do an Underdog draft with all of you. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.